Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Welcome to this week's first public forum. This forum is the time for the community to provide comments and suggestions on the draft police reform plan to be submitted to the governor by April 1st. My colleagues and I have been reviewing the draft plan and will use the public input we hear during these sessions to inform the amendments we make together. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes for comments. If speakers are participating via Zoom, we ask they address the council with the same respect they would expect and to avoid the use of profanities. Also, if you're participating via Zoom and you're calling in, make sure you turn that down so that you don't get the reverberation. A staff member will notify speakers when they have 30 seconds left, and speakers will be removed from the Zoom call once their time has expired. Staff members will read the first 3 minutes of all written comments submitted. We'll begin.
Asia Gosselin. Oh, Bridget, you're on mute.
I'm gonna buy a t-shirt that says you're on mute.
Thank you, Hazel.
You're welcome.
Dear council members, Loretta Scott, Malik Evans, Mitchell Gruber, Willie Lightfoot, Miguel Melendez, Lachey Harris, Mary Lupian, Michael Patterson, and Jose Pio. After carefully considering the plan, I want to provide my input on the proposal as it currently stands. I would first like to voice my disappointment in how this plan was created. Our community has numerous organizations for restorative and transformative justice. Instead of hiring an outside research firm, Wilmer Hale, for $250,000, a portion of that could have gone to community organizations such as Partners for Restorative Initiatives that are trained in facilitating and forming agreements. Additionally, other cities such as Albany had a wide range of community members who participated in the process of forming a plan for their city. The city of Rochester has a number of reputable organizations that could have been included, such as Free the People Rock and the Citywide Tenant Union, to have included more voices and perspectives within the community on reinventing the police. Voting to pass this plan as it currently stands without amendment condones the exclusion of community participation and is directly counter to the explicit directions laid out in Executive Order 203. The order requires steps for implementation as part of the plan. The proposal falls woefully short. Where specifics are provided, i.e., the aim to reduce RPD personnel in the next 5 to 10 years, the plan lacks clarity. I am looking for specifics. How many personnel or by what percent will RPD reduce its staff? And the timeline needs to be specific too. In this example, 10 years is too long. By April 1st, 2023, 35% reduction in patrol personnel would be an acceptable example. The council should consider what services RPD is provided: clerical, parking, conflict resolution, wellness checks, etc., that could be redirected to civilian task forces to employ the people of Rochester. Additionally, specifics must be provided for the redirected funding to acceptable non-police personnel. For example, I want to know that $10 million will be allocated to the Office of Crisis Intervention over the next 3 years. I would request the plan be amended to include the formation of a people's budgeting process.
30 seconds.
As well as a civilian conflict resolution task force trained by PIIR or similarly New York-based mediation organizations with a budget voted on by the people of Rochester. Similarly, the people of Rochester should be granted the legal right to select a panel of their peers to interview applicants who are authorized to use deadly force against members of the community. All of this can be implemented by April 2023.
That's time.
Elaine Erblin.
To our city council members, I am forwarding this email to you in case Mary Lupian has not shared it with you, because I want you to see the pathetic excuse of a plan that whomever in the city drafted behind closed doors without public input, even though they had draft plans from several groups. This is a comparison of the PAB draft plan and what the city wants you to approve. I urge you with every fiber of my being to reject the city's draft plan and seriously look at the much more specific draft plan from the PAB. The pastors round table and all the other plans submitted and come up with concrete, measurable plans with specific dates and deadlines to complete each item. I am a lifelong city resident and abhor the recent treatment of the 9-year-old girl who was handcuffed and pepper sprayed. The deadly treatment of Daniel Prude was also abhorrent and brought shame to our city. The training manual for policing, which dates back to the 1819 slave blueprint, needs to be burned and totally rewritten to better serve and protect our Black and Brown community members. The city's draft plan merely moves some furniture around. It does not do anything to make major changes in policing policies. The time is now, and the people are you to step forward and make bold and lasting changes in how the RPD begins to protect and serve all of our citizens.
Mike Tobin.
Dear council members, we are strongly urging each one of you to vote no to accepting the mayor's proposed draft police reform statement to be submitted to the governor. The PAB spent many hours and included significant members of the community in order to review and make suggestions and proposals to the draft plan text. The mayor has deleted all the specifics, concrete funding, deadlines, anti-racism training, and other specific commitments that were recommended by the PAB. To truly address systemic and institutional racism, one must make real changes that address the real problem, that the processes in the Rochester Police Department are racist. Therefore, processes have to be changed, and nothing in the mayor's draft changes anything. It is once again lip service. If you do not agree that there is systemic and institutional racism in the processes of the Rochester Police Department, you have not looked deeply and honestly into this matter. If you think this draft plan being presented to you is going to change anything, you are deluding yourself. Please, please, please find your courage to do what you know in your heart to be right and just.
Sharon Turner.
You're on mute.
Dear City Council members, Loretta Scott, Willie Lightfoot, Mitch Gruber, Malik Evans, Michael Patterson, Jose Pio, Lachey Harris, Miguel A. Melendez Jr., and Mary Lupien. A naked man in mental health distress is handcuffed and hooded and then asphyxiated by the police. Peaceful protesters are gassed, hit with rubber bullets, and assaulted. A 9-year-old girl experiencing family trauma is handcuffed and pepper sprayed. A mother erroneously accused of shoplifting and now charged with trespassing is handcuffed and pepper sprayed while her terrified 3-year-old child watches. 2 of the officers are the same ones at the scene when the 9-year-old was pepper sprayed. Now, early Wednesday morning, the police shot and killed a man in obvious mental distress outside Open Door Mission who had stolen a kitchen knife and was cutting himself. PIC was not called. One of the officers was reported to be reaching for his taser, but another officer shot and killed the man instead. There are so many of these types of incidents historically in Rochester. I can personally go back to an incident on my street in July 2002 when police action and then neglectful inaction contributed to Sean Duke's death. There was a lot of talk, but no lasting change occurred. We are in an emergency situation. We need trained mental health person and crisis intervention professionals right now. Police arrival on the scene of each of the above incidents has resulted in additional harm or death. Rochester citizens overwhelmingly voted to form PAB and to empower this group to independently address issues of police accountability. PAB created a well-researched and extensive plan of action with significant community input to reform the police as mandated by New York State Executive Order 203. It includes very specific actions with clear deadlines for implementation. Please, City Council members, you have the power to finally make a difference. If you compare PAB's original proposal for police reform with the working group and mayor's plan, you will see that the mayor's plan lacks a true commitment to specific initiatives and actual implementation plans with serious deadlines to meet. For example,
30
aim
seconds.
to reduce RPD personnel with the next 5 to 10 years. This is such a superficial commitment. I urge you to see the mayor's plan for what it is, a smokescreen for inaction. Reject this plan and use the original one from PAB, which has some actual teeth. If you are concerned with the funding needed to ensure these changes are made, think about it this way. Oakland, California has twice the population of Rochester with the same number of police as Rochester. Half or even a third of our police budget could easily be reassigned to
That's
support.
time.
Judith Tobin.
Council members, we are opposed to the proposed draft plan that the mayor presented regarding the Rochester Police Department changes. We feel that it is not making any substantial changes to address the inherent police system and policies and procedures regarding what to do in confrontational situations. Also, it is essential that any present police officer that has ties to a white supremacy group either be dismissed or given an inside job, i.e. not on the streets. Said person must be forbidden to talking about in any way his white supremacy opinions. If he does so, he will be dismissed. Any future police officer must be vetted thoroughly to determine if there is any connection to white supremacy or similar group. If there is any connection, that person must not be considered for training by the police department. You must do soul searching about yourself and white supremacy and either take on the challenge of making real systematic changes or admit that you are still a racist, as all of us white people are, who is not doing any anti-racist activity and continues to offer only duly elected persons lip service. Thank you for your attention to this opinion.
Brianna Fideli.
Hello, I urge City Council to accept the recommendations for the police reform plan outlined by the Police Accountability Board to be in full. The draft plan is unacceptable at this time. Policies, practices, procedures, and training of the Rochester Police Department have failed the citizens of Rochester.
Alex Klee.
I urge City Council to accept the recommendations for Rochester's Police Reform Plan, Executive Order 203, outlined by the PAB in their entirety. The draft plan is unacceptable at this time and does not take specific timely measures to reallocate RPD funds and protect citizens. We have repeatedly seen RPD invoke unnecessary violence, sometimes with deadly consequence, without any accountability or action to remove the officers involved in brutality against our citizens and communities of color. Fund the PAB and incorporate their demands into this reform plan.
Matt Lauman.
I have been a resident of Rochester for just 2.5 years, and I am amazed by how little time it took for it to become clear to me that the RPD needs extensive reform. The plan as it currently stands is frankly laughable. I find it absurd that the City Council would gut the newly formed PAB's plan of any and all attempts at specificity, commitment, and above all, actual accountability. Policing in the country as a whole needs change. Rochester is quite clearly not exempt from this fact. As a member of this community and a resident of this city, I demand that you restore all of the PAB's proposed changes to the plan and pass it as a binding law rather than a simple resolution. To do otherwise is to tell the people of Rochester that you prefer to see us gassed, beaten, abused, and murdered by the people we turn to when we need help. I look forward to hearing about the introduction of your new plan.
Ron Heery by Zoom.
I believe they were not in the waiting room.
Okay. Pia, Sari, Briannis.
Dear City Council, the time to act is now. This is overdue. We need a serious reform plan for policing in Rochester. The continuing actions of the Rochester Police Department show what I feel is a complete disregard for justice and human rights. As a resident, I have lost complete faith in the RPD and their ability to carry out public safety. We, the people of Rochester, do not want to support this abuse and sheer lawlessness that RPD continues to display. City Council must accept the recommendations for police reform as outlined by the Police Accountability Board. The Police Accountability Board must be fully funded. The city must commit full resources to the People in Crisis team. The people of Rochester voted yes for this board, and we are still waiting for government to enact what the people have voted for. The current draft plan has some shocking omissions, and this is not what we want. We want complete reform because the current RPD policies, practices, procedures, and training is a failure. They do not help the residents and citizens of the city of Rochester. As a tax-paying resident, I do not want to continue funding the RPD in its current form. I do not want to fund a half-hearted attempt at sugarcoating reforms. City Council must give Rochester what we voted yes for: a police accountability board with real power, a people in crisis team to successfully treat persons in mental health crisis, and more of the city budget going toward opportunities for the people of Rochester, for their health, education, recreation, and well-being. Thank you.
Tara Nelson by Zoom.
Hello, my name is Tara Nelson, and I am here to support the Police Accountability Board's recommendations in full. I think that this revised version is inadequate. I also would like to advocate for the use that this is actually a very ongoing issue here in Rochester, as is known, but I work with archives here at Public Archives in Rochester, and I have put together a playlist of video that goes back to the early 1970s that advocate for that show that this has been an ongoing issue, that the citizens of this community have been fighting for justice, for peace, and for the ability to have oversight of police for since the early 1970s and before. And I have a short video that I would like to share with you that comes from 1972. That showcases one of these particular community groups that was here in Rochester. And they have some excellent recommendations, but this is a very short video and I'll show you an excerpt from it.
My name is Charles Lundy, and I'm the chairman of the Inner City Police Coalition. The Inner City Police Coalition is a group representing community organizations formed for the purpose of combating police brutality, meaning to make the community aware that police brutality is not a myth but a reality. However, citing brutality, documenting cases, and possibly eliminating it altogether is not our only goal. In an effort to better police community relations, we have gone into other areas. We are trying to have a 24-hour answering service available for community people, a number to call at any time so that people can receive legal advice when arrested. We have also conducted several workshops with community people and lawyers present. These workshops are geared to inform people of the rights they have when arrested and to be aware if any of those rights are violated. We have issued pamphlets and other literature to community organizations to hold their own workshops. We have monitored
30
police calls
seconds.
to observe police conduct and possibly prevent brutality on the scene. And we have put together this film to inform you as to the reality of police brutality.
So I think some of the recommendations here are advisable, and we could maybe perpetuate them. 24-hour answering service for legal advice, and for assistance that is manned by the community. Thank you for your time.
Evan Brent.
Hello. As a business owner in the city of Rochester and resident of Monroe County, I feel it is important to take meaningful steps to protect the residents and visitors of the city from injustice and violence at the hands of police, which too often falls on people of color and the poor. Rochester Police Department specifically has shown a history of repeated problems and has never been effectively held accountable. I urge the City Council to take bold and meaningful action by fully funding the Police Accountability Board and taking a spirit of the vote, quote unquote, approach to implementation of the people's will as shown overwhelmingly in the referendum creating it. Take concrete steps and create measurable metrics for change and progress, and tools to hold organizations, including the RPD, DAB, and city government accountable to them. Renegotiate the RPD contract and remove unjust barriers to accountability for police officers. Reduce the headcount and budget of RPD, and hold those who remain empowered with a gun and qualified immunity to the highest of standards. Benchmark the standards for proportionate response and use of force on the U.S. Armed Forces standards for interactions with civilians abroad. Do all this with proactive transparency. The city of Rochester and all of its people will benefit from a smaller headcount, lower budget RPD, and the funds being reallocated to services that support our communities in ways that reduce the factors that lead to crime, homelessness, etc. Be bold, and the people of Rochester and the greater Rochester area will applaud you.
Doug Hazer.
I've worked for the Family and Crisis Intervention Team for over 11 years. If I didn't hold that position, I would be heaping praise on the Department of Recreation and Human Services for their development of the new Crisis Intervention Services team. They looked at different models from all over the country. They enlisted help from existing programs and experts and came up with a viable pilot program. They didn't look inward though. They didn't see facet at all. Whatever information they garnered on our unit came from second or third hand sources, many of whom had their own agenda. Then we made a mistake. We complained. We complained because the new emergency response social workers were going to be paid substantially more than us. We complained because through the Civil Service Commission, though the Civil Service Commission approved the creation of these positions on behalf of Human Resources, the jobs were never posted. We didn't know about the openings until after they were filled. So what is the information the DHRS lacked? First, we all meet or exceed the minimum qualifications required of these new social workers. Second, we don't have emergency response in our job title. Believe me, if we thought of it, we would have. They've referred to as first responders, and we're assumed to be second responders. The difference is only in the way the proposed environment is assessed for safety. The outcome for both of us and them must be the same and is demonstrated very simply. Do the police need to be there? No. Then it's safe. Yes, not safe. Our assessment is done by the police. Theirs is done through a complicated protocol developed for the 911 and 211 dispatchers, but the outcome is the same. For years, we have responded to all the specific jobs outlined in the new program description and more. For less serious jobs, the police are gone when we arrive. Their presence is dictated using the same criteria for pick as for us. So what did our complaining achieve? As soon as DHRS took over for the police department, our unit began to be dismantled. We're down one full-time staff and one part-time. We're told that these positions won't be filled. We used to have 5 cars, now we have 2. The dispatchers have been instructed to send either pick or fit teams in our place for all but a few types of jobs.
30 seconds.
We no longer respond to critical incidents. Police officers who have relied on our support for years are unsure if we still exist. We've just been told that we are no longer allowed to ask for overtime or comp time. Facet may cease to exist or be diminished beyond recognition. This isn't just a matter of policy. They're sinking a boat with people in it. 8 people comprising an ethnically and racially diverse team of social workers, counselors, and therapists with unique and relevant experience who want to continue serving the community they love.
Olivia Fox.
I urge the City Council to accept the recommendations for the police reform plan outlined by the Police Accountability Board in full. The current draft is completely unacceptable. The policies, practices, procedures, and training of the Rochester Police Department have failed the citizens of Rochester.
Geoff Grazer.
Dear City Council, please accept in full the recommendations for police reform outlined by the Police Accountability Board. The mayor's proposal is unacceptable. There must be specific measures for the RPD and ways to evaluate them.
Katie Gregory.
The police reform plan that has been drafted only offers aspirational, unspecific promises which fail to define deadlines, commit to funding, or make this plan legally enforceable. It is lacking in major ways, and if passed, stands to jeopardize the safety of Rochesterians moving forward. It is clear that major reforms, far surpassing what this plan entails, are needed to protect citizens from the abuses of the RPD. Too many people have suffered at the hands of RPD, and this community has shown through demonstrations and protests over the last year that it will no longer be tolerated. You have a duty as a council to serve the people of the city and to act in a just, equitable manner, represent what we want. These wants include funding a people in crisis team and other social services, funding the Police Accountability Board, ban chemical weapons on minors and peaceful protesters, fund language access emergency services, terminate officers affiliated with the white supremacy groups, terminate officers who fail to turn on their body cameras. Please make these amendments before this plan is submitted. Thank you.
Olivia Highland.
I sincerely urge City Council to accept the recommendations for Rochester's Police Reform Plan, Executive Order 203, outlined by the PAB in their entirety. The draft plan at this time is unacceptable. It does not take specific, timely measures to reallocate RPD funds and protect citizens. We have repeatedly seen RPD invoke unnecessary violence, sometimes with deadly consequence, without any type of accountability or action to remove the officers involved in brutality against our citizens, specifically our citizens and communities of color. Fund the PAB and incorporate their demands into this reform plan. Thank you.
Matthias Liesel.
Transferring police responses to de-escalatory, mental health, and community-based responses is a priority in Rochester. Given the recent deaths at police hands of 2 men in mental distress, as well as pepper spraying of a 9-year-old girl. It is also a priority for the current federal administration. Tucked into the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan recently passed in the House and Senate is a provision that would empower Rochester in the implementation of the Person in Crisis team, which creates a mobile unit of mental health and other professionals to respond to calls traditionally handled by police as an alternative to police presence. Specifically, this makes available an 85% reimbursement via the existing funding instrument of Medicaid for community-based mobile crisis intervention services that include at least one behavioral health care professional and whose numbers are trained in trauma-informed care, de-escalation strategies, and harm reduction. The city's CIC team program, which establishes a team of non-police professionals to respond to 911 calls, should readily qualify. Much research indicates that programs of this kind are quite effective. In Eugene, Oregon, such a program known as Cahoots has operated for 30 years, has likely saved untold numbers of lives with an annual budget of $2 million, and has the auxiliary benefit of saving the city around $22.5 million in medical response and public safety costs. The Eugene program is being adopted as a model for cities across the country. Research that is being conducted in Rochester currently as part of the Executive Order 203 response already suggests that some 40% of 911 and 211 calls would be appropriately rerouted to a medical response. Acknowledging this, the city is acting swiftly to develop a PIC team, which will replace police presence with professionals called in to deal with public safety incidents in a peaceful and humane manner. This measure is widely supported in the community, and I am looking forward to seeing how this program is adapted here. The PIC team should be established and grown straight away, especially given the funding that is readily available for it. Police violence against anybody is horrific, and we know that such violence primarily affects people of color. There is a lot we need to do to reform
30
police
seconds.
officers, including dealing with the fact that Black residents are more than 7 times more likely to be arrested for minor drug crimes than white community members. The fact that Rochester has twice as many police per person as a typical large American city, despite nearly half of 911 211 calls not requiring a police presence, as well as the horrific killing of Daniel Prude, all of which reflect the need for structural reform of policing in Rochester. Since the money is available, I urge the city to link with these federal resources in order to accelerate the development of the PIC program.
Michelle Pagula.
To the elected officials of Rochester, I am beside myself at the state of our city and the lack of transparency from you, our mayor, and all parties that were involved in the writing of your police reform plan. This should be the constituents' reform plan. We elect you and we voted for the Police Accountability Board. It is well documented that the police cannot police and discipline themselves. It is well documented that the city is going to look out for its best interest. Instead of the city seeing the will of the people through, you have been combative in turning information over to the PAB and have hacked the content out of their recommendations for Executive Order 203. Our city, which we should have pride in, is an embarrassment and disgrace. We see you looking out for yourself, your next election, and not doing the business of the people. Fully fund the PAB and allow them to do the work that the city desperately needs. Take note of recent headlines in our country. I did not see a line for our upcoming city budget for payments in millions of dollars to victims and families for the excessive and negligent manner which you are allowing your police officers to operate. Please know I fully support honorable, moral officers who carry themselves with integrity. I have a family member in law enforcement and hear the stories of various calls, the danger, split-second decision-making, and the unexpected turns that happen in an instant. It is a demanding job. I fear for them. Know that I will go to any extent myself to ensure they go home to their 2 young children. I am not pointing a finger at all officers, but we know that there are men and women in the Rochester Police Force and the structure which allows these types to keep their jobs, who make the jobs of their counterparts more dangerous by the white supremacist lens they see the world and their job through. Do not continue to allow these people to wear what is an honorable badge, jeopardize the lives of their brothers and sisters in the force, and tarnish our city's name. You are enablers. Fully fund and expand the person in crisis team. Expand the team to the extent that they can show up on any call, weapon or not. Their compensation should be reflective of the danger they will inherently come with the job. Hire police officers that look like the community that they are policing.
30 seconds.
Why in this city, which 50% of the population is Black, Hispanic, do we have a 75% white police force? The recent videos of 7 to 8 white officers violating Daniel Prude, the child in the Harris Street incident, makes me sick and angry. And my first thought is, well, gee, go figure. White Rochester officers treating a person of color with zero respect and dignity. Officers need racial justice training, not once a year or every other year. This is continuing education. It needs to become second nature and it needs to be learned.
That's
It is
time.
not.
And Shaughnessy.
SURJ ROC, the local chapter of the national organization showing up for racial justice, which is made up of committed white people who are working on anti-racism throughout the country, was among the earliest supporters of an independent, powerful police advisory board. We signed on to the campaign, spoke at many in-person city council meetings in its favor, and continue to support the PAB as a member of the PAB Alliance. We are writing to express our grave concern about the barriers that have been placed in front of full implementation of the Police Accountability Board. This group was strongly approved by a vote in our city, and we are demanding that it fully be implemented. All of us are losing so much and are being affected by the status quo. The following are our concerns. 1, it must be fully funded. The PAB must have immediate access to its full $5 million budget to begin carrying out its urgent life-saving work effectively. 2, the RPD has not provided information in a timely way despite the PAB having the power and right to request it. This also makes it impossible to operate effectively. 3, it needs to have disciplinary power authorized. While we understand that this issue is in the hands of the court, we urge you to do everything within your power to support inclusion of disciplinary power in the PAB toolbox. The necessity for a viable, fully funded PAB with disciplinary powers has grown exponentially in the last year, as you well know, by the increased number of police incidents involving violence and death. There must be a system of accountability put in place to hold the police department liable for its actions against our residents, and City Council needs to show its support for implementation of that possibility. Rochester could be a model to the nation of police accountability board that is effective, fair, and can hold police officers responsible for their disproportionate, life-threatening actions. Rochester police are too frequently warned and receive national headlines for their violent and inappropriate actions against those they are supposed to protect. The PAB is a critical element in efforts to change the ways our police and community operate in relationship to each other. More importantly, without these changes, businesses will choose to locate elsewhere. Those
30
living
seconds.
outside the city will avoid participating in city activities, and our Black and brown neighbors and their families will continue to live with the terror of police abuse and violence instead of their right to true public safety. We believe that we are all hurt by this continued form of institutional racism, and we encourage you to take strong and brave leadership by supporting the work of the PAB. Delaying full implementation of the PAB has contributed to the deaths of Daniel Prude and Tyshawn Jones. We should honor their loss by ensuring the protection of others they themselves were not given.
Liz Brown.
I urge City Council to accept in full the recommendations for police reform outlined by the Police Accountability Board. The mayor's draft plan is unacceptable at this time. The policies, practices, procedures, and training of the Rochester Police Department have failed the citizens of Rochester.
Martha Serrero.
To all those concerned about living a life with beauty in it, when the rule of law infringes on the minority, the courts must investigate. The RPD consistently infringes on the civil rights of human beings it considers as others. This false narrative of white Europeans being superior to others was brought to our shores about 400 years ago. This narrative exists in our law enforcement community. If you were to give a civic class to Rochester children on the RPD, what would you say? Mothers and fathers in Rochester have to have private civic class talks with their children on how to survive around a white supremacy police department. James Baldwin, a distinguished literary and social activist, said, if white people could learn to love themselves, and that could take some time, then the Negro problem would go away. I totally believe this common sense approach. I suggest the abusive police officers be investigated and given help to love themselves. We need a new design of law enforcement governing body and a PAB. Government decays if the rule of the law is abused and not investigated. Please protect our children.
Megan Garvey. And she's on Zoom.
Good evening. My name is Megan Garvey. I am here to speak to you as a city resident, but also as a licensed clinical social worker and a trauma therapist. Like any true therapist, I find myself sitting in a listening session wanting to ask you questions. So humor me. Do you prefer to drive without a seatbelt? Genuinely, no shame if you do. There's usually an adrenaline lover in every crowd. And while we could debate the ethics of that for days, I'm sure, the decision to not wear a seatbelt is technically one that you can consent to for yourself. Now, let's say you find yourself personally choosing to not wear a seatbelt. Would you believe that this personal position gives you the right to start removing seatbelts from everyone else's cars? My guess is no. You're reasonable people. You wouldn't feel entitled to start removing seatbelts from the cars of others in your community because you know that access to a basic safety measure is not something that you have the right to deny to other people. Now, certainly a seatbelt is not foolproof. Its existence alone cannot prevent an accident, but it remains a critical safety measure because it provides a fundamental level of assurance most people need to be able to get in their cars in the first place. Even if there is a crash, knowing that you have some measure in place to deter the possibility of your premature death is what makes it psychologically possible for people to get in their cars and drive about their days as they need to. With safety as an essential human need, I really cannot overstate the psychological power of safety measures on our mental well-being. Knowing this truth, I also cannot overstate the psychological need for the safety measure that is a fully funded, non-obstructed police accountability board. As long as RPD is allowed to operate without a meaningful system of accountability, the bad apples of RPD remain emboldened to bring death unjustly upon our communities. Even if the city of Rochester chose to spend all of its money on mental health resources, our most vulnerable BIPOC siblings will continue to suffer psychological trauma from the ever-present question of, will I be next? No implementation of mental health intervention can outpower the traumatic effect of
30
an
seconds.
active, constant threat of violence and death. No mental health intervention can outpower the traumatic impact of knowing your government officials technically have the means to hold officers accountable for their actions, but actively choose not to do so. You're actively choosing to deny seatbelts to others despite widespread public support and the moral imperative to do so. If you truly believe mental health matters, this trauma professional is telling you, you do not deny your people seatbelts. If you truly want to center the needs of the people, fully fund and stop obstructing the Police Accountability Board. Thank you.
That was the last speaker, Madam President.
Thank you. And thank you to all our participants for sharing their comments tonight. We look forward for our second public forum, which will be held tomorrow starting at 5:30 p.m. If you would like to participate in tomorrow's session, more information on how to sign up is available at www.cityofrochester.gov/public meeting access. We will be accepting signups until tomorrow at 3 p.m. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great night, everyone.